All right, so our next speaker, again, I'd like to share a little bit about how these talks come into being. We always have typically, a conference call where we spend about a half hour chatting about the industry, what's happening. And I love how this talk and this topic that's coming up from Matt Quinn, the Vice President of Engineering at Audible. Because one of the things we talked about is that I get this kind of feeling like, especially after the last 10 years of mobile, that voice for a lot of developers, and having been one, I get it. But for a lot of developers, it kind of seems like maybe it's just not that big of a leap, We've done all the backends on mobile, we're now in the cloud, we've got all our APIs set, we're delivering things in real time. And so you think, okay, so now I'm going to extend to another user interface. From a mobile interface, I'm going to go to a voice interface. But let me tell you what, that is a huge leap. And it is a rabbit hole. And I think that Matt kind of reached that conclusion in our first call. So I'm excited to see it come to fruition in this call. I'd like to bring up Mr. Matt Quinn, Vice President of Engineering at Audible. Let's give it up for Matt.
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Quinn, Vice President of Software Development at Audible. I'm going to tell two stories today. One is about Audible and who we are, and the other is about our journey with voice and Alexa specifically. My role at Audible is to lead all of our Amazon software development teams. I work out of our Cambridge, Massachusetts software engineering office. We're inside of an Amazon building there and have teams that are in close proximity to Amazon Alexa, which is there as well. So everything at Audible is a book. This is my chapter, or my book in chapters. I started at startups in the Boston area. I've been working in technology for well over 20 years. Worked in a number of different industries across a broad range of technologies as a software engineer. The first professional program that I ever wrote was in DOS, dating myself, and I'll return to that later because it's actually relevant to the topic. At the end of my startup career, I started to lead and manage software teams, got a master's in management, and then started working at larger companies. I moved on to a large public company called Vistaprint in the Boston area, and then got an opportunity to join up with Amazon. I've been working at Amazon for 4 years. I've been at Audible for 3. My first year at Amazon was working on a product called Fire Phone. How many people have heard of Fire Phone? Raise your hand. More than a few. And while at Fire Phone, got exposed to Audible, and that's what led me here. So Audible is thrilled that all of you are in Newark this week. We're headquartered here, and we've been here for many years now. Our founder and CEO, Don Katz, is a digital pioneer and a cultural pioneer and continues to lead his, quote, gang, as he calls us, today. And it's amazing to think that Audible has recognized the power of the spoken word for decades now. The company was founded in 1995 and has continued to imagine and invent over that entire duration. And I'll talk a lot more about what that means. So who is Audible? First and foremost, we are the largest purveyor and producer of audiobooks on the planet. 425,000 titles in our catalog. Second, we are a content company that is great at technology. And third, we're missionaries on a quest to change the world by working with the people in the cities where we work by using our products and having human interactions with those people. And I'll talk about all three of those as we go. So there's no better way to get to know Audible than to listen. And since we're going down the rabbit hole of voice, here's a short clip from Scarlett Johansson's performance of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
So she was considering in her own mind, as well as she could, for the hot day made her feel very sleepy and stupid, whether the pleasure of making a daisy chain would be worth the trouble of getting up and picking the daisies, when suddenly a white rabbit with pink eyes ran close by her. There was nothing so very remarkable in that. Nor did Alice think it so very much out of the way to hear the rabbit say to itself, oh dear, I shall be late." When she thought it over afterwards, it occurred to her that she ought to have wondered at this, but at the time it all seemed quite natural. But when the rabbit actually took a watch out of its waistcoat pocket and looked at it, and then hurried on, Alice started to her feet, for it flashed across her mind that she had never before seen a rabbit with either a waistcoat pocket or a watch to take out of it. And burning with curiosity, she ran across the field after it, and fortunately was just in time to see it pop down a large rabbit hole under the hedge.
So, fun fact, that was actually directed by Scarlett's sister. I learned that yesterday, and recorded at Audible Studios down the street. I mentioned that we're the largest producer of audiobooks on the planet. We have a professional studio down the street inside of our office where the likes of Scarlett Johansson, Joe Biden, and various others have recorded content for us. So, how did this all get started? I bet nobody thought they would see a picture of a fanny pack at the Voice Summit today, but it all started with a fanny pack. Don Katz is and always will be a writer, and this idea for Audible was born out of Don's fixation in the mid-90s that there had to be a better way. He was carrying this fanny pack around with cassette tapes, audio tapes, and he got consumed with this notion that there was a better way. He started studying what at the time were very new technologies, RAM memory, and the internet, and came up with the idea to deliver content to customers, to their PCs, that they would then download to a device that we would create. One of our people principles, which is the corporate tenets, if you will, for how we run our company is imagine and invent before they ask. And it all started with this. So this is the Audible player, the first ever handheld MP3 player in the world. So this device came out years before iPod or Creative, before anyone else was doing anything like this. We effectively invented DRM, because it didn't exist, and deployed it on this device. And in 1997, you could download content to this device and take it with you to listen. So where do we go from there? The next big inflection point that I want to talk about happened in the year 2000. At the time, audiobook narration was this sort of rote, metered recitation of the book, almost monotone. And that all changed when Don met Robin Williams. Don tells a story about a conversation he had with Robin in his living room where he tried to convince him on this notion of a private show from a friend in your ear. He impressed upon him that you didn't have to be on the Tonight Show or the Late Show or go to a comedy club or do some big venue to actually reach millions of customers. You could do it through Audible. Robin bought into the concept, and in 2000 recorded the first audio performance, which now has really redefined the way audiobooks are performed. Almost all of our books now are performances, and we have many, many actors that tell us it's their favorite thing to do, because it sort of strips everything else away, and they're just using their voice to tell the story. One interesting and kind of fun little side story about this conversation was Jonathan Winters was in the room as well. He was Robin's then mentor. And Robin wasn't really buying into the concept. And Jonathan at one point challenged him and said, "Robin, I don't think you're funny anymore." I can only imagine how Robin Williams reacted to that comment, but Jonathan Winters went on to explain that Robin had become accustomed to using his physical aspects to make people laugh. And that when you distill humor down to its very basic nature, you're truly funny only when you can make someone laugh with just your voice. And that is really what sort of got Robin over the hump. In 2008, as our content library continued to grow by leaps and bounds, we were acquired by Amazon. And especially these days, I don't have to convince anybody that this was something that added a ton of fuel to an already meteoric rocket ship that was Audible. We've had an incredible relationship with Amazon since then, and a lot of innovation and products have come out of it, including our integration with Alexa. Moving ahead quickly again, highlighting more innovation and imagine and invent before they ask is Audiobook Creation Exchange. So this is effectively a dating service between audiobook narrators and authors, where we leverage the power of the creative crowd to create audiobook recordings. And many titles, many best-selling titles have come through ACX. Not to be outdone, in 2012, we launched Whisper Sync for Voice. Whisper Sync for Voice synchronizes your listening and reading. It's incredibly complicated technology that provides a magical, kind of simple experience. And for example, you can listen or read on your Kindle e-reader in the evening, listen on your Alexa in the morning, and then hop in your car and listen on the Audible app on your way to work. And the whole time, you never lose the story. It stays with you that entire time, all facilitated through Whisper Sync for Voice. I mentioned our original content, or this notion of audiobook performance. This continues to be a huge focus, and we continue to study and draw inspiration from culture and technology, another of our people principles, in working with folks like Mel Robbins and others to really create culture. I was in another panel this morning. I talked about this notion of creating culture and creating these sort of zeitgeist moments that you might actually talk to a coworker or a friend about around the water cooler. So we continue to really lean into this notion that original content is a powerful thing. And all due respect to any other media provider out there, but I would encourage you all to think about sort of when the first original content from other media providers on the planet kind of hit the wire and when you started hearing about it. We were doing this in the year 2000, so it's been a core part of what Audible does for almost 2 decades now. One of the really neat things we've done with original content is Audible Theater. So remember the notion of a private show? This sort of takes that to the stage, where we're sponsoring short-run theater performances that otherwise would be really hard to get out to a large body of customers, and then putting those within our library so that our customers can access them. And finally, and perhaps the most deeply meaningful of our people principles, is activating caring. I talked about how we're missionaries on a quest to make the world a better place by working with the people in the cities where we work and live. And the ultimate example of this is recent Project Listen Up, where we gave a free year of audiobooks from Audible and a tablet to every high school student in Newark. Out of that, Newark high school teachers created a communal listening program focused on Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime, which is an absolutely incredible story about a mixed-race boy growing up in apartheid South Africa and all the experiences that he has. And this quote from the book really summarizes why this program is so powerful.
Nelson Mandela once said, "If you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. If you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart." He was so right. When you make the effort to speak someone else's language, even if it's just basic phrases here and there, you are saying to them, "I understand that you have a culture and identity that exists beyond me. I see you as a human being."
So Trevor can relate to these kids. The kids can relate to Trevor, and Audible is the bridge. It's amazing. Now, if you didn't believe all of that, then look at what our customers are doing. They download 2 billion hours of content a year. On any given day, they spend 2 hours listening, and on average, download more than 17 books. So that's Audible. We're at the Voice Summit, so let's talk about Amazon Alexa. So when I started with Amazon, I heard about this project called Doppler. I had no idea what it was. Amazon's got a lot of secret projects and code names. Even if you learn the code name, sometimes you can get in trouble. I don't know how you avoid learning the code name, but it's true. So Doppler turned out to be Amazon Echo. And it was interesting because before it launched, I learned after the fact that there was actually very mixed opinion on whether this device would be successful. There's a building, Amazon building named after Doppler now, so I think that we can all know how that story ended. I mentioned that I moved from Amazon to Audible, and lead our teams at Audible that integrate with all of these Amazon technologies, one of which is Alexa. When I joined 3 years ago, at the time, we had just finished our initial implementation with the Alexa platform. It was very basic, provided the very most basic features and functions you could imagine: play, stop, pause, really nothing more. Since then, we've grown the team significantly, and we've added a lot more advanced features and functionality like chapter navigation, rewind, fast forward, and various other ways that customers can actually discover Audible content on the device. So one of the themes that I heard in the last talk and that Pete mentioned in the main thrust of kind of my talk today is voice is different. And if there's one thing that you take away from this talk, it's that you have to think about writing code for voice in a very, very different way than writing code for web or mobile or anything else. And you're probably wondering, why is there a picture of a TRS-80 on the screen right now? Well, this is the first computer that I ever programmed on when I was a kid. And to me, it represented really well the transitions that we've gone through in the last 25 years or 30 years of technology. We started 30, 40 years ago writing code on devices like this. We moved to client server and then to web development, and then went through the web to mobile period. I think the last one is probably the most relevant for us to talk about as a comparison with voice. And I think they're very similar. Going from web to mobile was not as simple as learning a new language or writing code on a new stack. Going from a Microsoft server stack to LAMP is very, very different fundamentally. And I contend that the move to voice is very, very similar, if not something that we've never actually experienced before. And there's really 4 areas that I want to kind of focus on in terms of what you need to do and think about differently. And I have some kind of tales here from the team around things that we've run into in the last 3 years writing code on Alexa for Audible. So input, output, discovery, and possibilities. So we'll start with input. It's really hard to find an image for input, so this is just a really cool image that I'm going to leave on the screen while I talk about input. High level here, it's not as simple as request and response, right? What did the customer actually ask for? If you're in a mobile app and the customer taps a button, or you're on a web page and they select something from a drop-down, their input to you is entirely unambiguous, and you know exactly what they want to do. Do you want to proceed? Yes or no? We would like to think that the same is true on Alexa, and Alexa does a tremendous job abstracting away all of the ASR, the automated speech recognition, and NLU, natural language understanding, to really provide my team with a nice, concise package of exactly what the customer asked for. Great, so we're all set. We don't have to worry about it. Not so fast. There are examples that we've run into, and these are things that you'll have to think about when you're developing code for whatever domain you're in, where we are still perplexed by how to handle it, or it might not be as unambiguous as you think, and you need some additional context in order to figure out what to do for the customer. So the first one is, Alexa, read it. This is an interesting example because the way the data comes to us, the word it is not in the slot where the book typically is. So for us, that would be, Alexa, read the book It by Stephen King, and yet the data that we get gets a little mangled up because of the fact that it's the word it. The second one is Alexa, read in the bedroom. So you have many devices, you have a device in the bedroom, great, I want to read in the bedroom. Or do I want to read the audiobook in the bedroom? Again, you need to kind of think about the context here, and you don't know when these examples are going to come up until they do. And the last one that I'll talk about is Alexa, read the New York Times versus Alexa, read Where the Red Fern Grows. So in the latter example, it's probably obvious that you want to start where you left off using WhisperSync for that particular book. But for New York Times, because it's a periodical, maybe you want to start with today's edition of the New York Times versus where you left off on section D, page 2, or wherever you were yesterday. So point is, you just have to think about input, and you have to be smart about it. And even though Alexa packages all of the input up for you, it's not always going to be unambiguous what the customer asked for. Next, output. So I did a bit of research here, and I learned shockingly that the average size of a web page on the internet today is 2.4 megabytes. I feel complicit in this taking advantage of bandwidth that we are all engaged with. I was shocked that that number was so high, but it also wasn't surprising at the same time. Part of my theory here was that web pages are quite heavy. You are able to return a tremendous amount of data, not just in terms of the data itself, but the screen interface. The prior speaker mentioned this exact thing where you have an entire screen you can scan, you can provide all kinds of output to the customer. When you're returning a response through a voice interface, think about it like a conversation. You have a very limited amount of information that you can give back, right? So your responses need to be very short. And then from a technical perspective, think about a conversation. If you have a nice kind of engaging conversation with someone, it's a very quick kind of back and forth. There's probably not long pauses between the responses. So when you're returning the response back to the customer, you have to be super fast. And one thing that I dug in a bit, and we did some analysis of our code. So we call directly 10 services when we get a request in to our code for Alexa. And then those services call dozens of others. So you think about that, and you think about the fact that you want it to be conversational, all of a sudden performance and scaling are paramount. So you really have to think about that. And if you're leveraging, again, back to the web analogy, services that you're using for web that might be okay for web pages because of progressive loading and other technologies, you might need to rethink how you're building some of those services to work for voice. Discovery is harder, a lot harder. The device doesn't tell you what it can do. The Alexa Twitter page says, Alexa, tell me what you can do, right? So you need to be very clever about providing your content in very unique and interesting ways and figuring out how to insert it in places where the customer might not be expecting it, but where it's relevant. And then the second part of discovery is search. I saw one of the banners around the corner on a sidewalk. ComScore says that soon, I don't remember the exact time frame, but it was soon, 50% of searches will be through voice, right? When I search on my laptop at a normal resolution, not a crazy developer resolution, like a manager resolution, I get 5 results back that are above the fold, and I can scroll. If you have an Echo Show, great, you can get more results back, and you can actually use your finger to kind of slide and see different results. You can tell it to go to the next result, but the best customer experience is to get it right? So you really have to think about how search is going to work and whether or not that's something that you even want to afford your customers, because it can be a very frustrating experience. And last, possibilities are endless. We're just beginning to barely scratch the surface of what these devices can do. The conversational aspect of the devices and heading in that direction is really where things will go. And I wanted to provide at least a couple examples of things that we've thought about that we'd love to do on the device we haven't done yet. So imagine if you could have a conversation with the author. Imagine if you could go to the part in the book where Harry met Snape for the first time. And imagine if you could ask Alexa who Tyrion Lannister is. All just very compelling ways to engage the customer even more deeply with the audiobook. So, in summary, think about input and be prepared for some surprises. Be short and fast with your output. Think about whether discovery makes sense for you, and if it does, get it right. And the sky's the limit for the possibilities of what you can do on the device. So we'll bookend today with another clip from Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, where the cat explains how to get where you want to go.
And she began thinking over other children she knew who might do very well as pigs, and was just saying to herself, if one only knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt that it ought to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began rather timidly, as she did not at all know whether it would like the name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Come, it's pleased so far, thought Alice, and she went on. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. So long as I get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough.
So keep walking with voice. You'll eventually find out where you want to go. Thank you so much for your attention. As we say at Audible, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Matt. Fantastic.